Hello. Today we will talk about my 10 favorite sci-fi movies of all time. That's the only criteria, so let's start with the list. At number 10 we have Mad God. It was released in 2021 by Philip Tippett. Philip Tippett is a legend that is responsible for some of the most memorable stop-motion effects in movies like Star Wars, Robocop and Jurassic Park. And Mad God was his pet project he meticulously produced over the 30 years period as his side project and was finally finished with the aid of a Kickstarter campaign. You can see that the budget was very limited, but with that there is no creative restrictions, no studios to meddle with your affairs, which is great. What you get is a stop-motion nightmare trip. 80 minutes of stream-of-thought horror, imagination overload with very loose narrative, lots of open space for interpretation. We follow a so-called assassin. He's descending deep into the underground, each floor with its own rules, its own logic, its own ecosystem, and its own monsters, each more grotesque than the last. It is impossible to describe. I would just recommend to go in blind as much as you can. Among the movies on the list, this one is the most into the fantasy magical realm. That is why I have it at number 10, because most of the others following it are more sciencey. You could say it's a dark fantasy or a completely dystopian and unrecognizable post-apocalyptic science fiction. It has its ecosystems with its own rules and workings. I am a sucker for post-apocalyptic fiction. I will probably do a list of the best post-apoco movies or books, or maybe both, I've consumed. I also like a more mysterious, trippy stuff. So yeah, this movie is right into my system. This movie doesn't hold many grand scientific, societal questions most other movies on this list do. It is there just to be marveled at the wonder of the creator's imagination. It is a really, really amazing but very dark trip into the madness. Totally unique, and it's a wonder it even exists. At number 9, we have The Thing, released 1982, directed by John Carpenter. It also stars Kurt Russell, and he is great in it. Here we have, in my opinion, the perfect horror movie that is also a science fiction masterpiece. Originally, the adaptation started in the mid-70s, got stuck in the formation, and luckily for us, it eventually ended in the hands of John Carpenter, and luckily again for us that the movie Alien from Ridley Scott also showed the producers that science fiction horror can make money. We have a group of scientists at Antarctica who discover something, the thing. The best part, they do everything right, but the thing still goes completely to shit. This is how you should write a horror film. Smart people doing smart stuff, but still ending horribly. Yeah, I wish some other movies would do that. Prometheus. And the second best thing, the goddamn practical effects. My god, did they age well. The gore, the goo, the mutilations, the things, the absolute peak of stop-motion practical effects. And the third best thing, the plot makes sense, the motives and actions of the characters are logical and understandable, and the true horror comes with the realization that you will still die even if you do all the things right. Such a refreshing take. I really have a pet peeve with horror movies that only stupid do stupid and only that gets you killed. Nah. As an added bonus, we have Ennio Morricone who wrote the score. That's it. At number 8, we have Under the Skin, released in 2013. directed by Jonathan Glazer, great English director. It stars Scarlett Johansson in one of her most out there roles. We follow her around Scotland, where she seduces random lonely men. More than that would probably spoil too much. It is based on a book with the same name by Michael Faber, which I'm currently reading and have pretty good time doing so. The main theme is self-discovery. Kinda, but it is so damn weird and alien. The movie doesn't explain much, there is no spoken exposition, you are plunged in the weird, and only from the acts of the main protagonist you start to realize that this is something truly, truly alien. It is very bleak, more in the blue filter scope, but very effective in the mood it tries to portray. There are some hard, violent scenes, they stick with you for good. Visually, it is stunning. The dark pool scenes are instant classics. I predict this movie will age like fine wine and it will end up as a hard classic when we will look back. Why I love it? This truly alien consciousness is trying to understand itself, and I haven't seen anyone do this ever in such a way. The movie walks a very thinly on a razor's edge where you are not sure are the things just symbolic or should we take them at face value, leaving us with lots of room to interpret. And it has one of my favorite scores ever from the composer Mika Levi, also known as Mikachu. Glazer and Mikachu also worked together on the movie The Zone of Interest, also with stunning effect, a really good collaboration between of them, and Under the Skin is their first project. At number 7, we have Children of Men, released 2006 and directed by Alfonso Cuarón, probably one of the strongest active directors at the moment. Society is collapsing because for more than 20 years no children were born, women are infertile. It is near future dystopian Britain, people are losing or have lost hope. So yeah, society is collapsing. Again, post-apocalyptic. Yes. We are following Theo, played by Clive Owen, who gets mixed up with his past and some new group of people that have some underlying agenda. It is thrilling. The action scenes are one of the best ever made. Technically, it is worth and is probably studied a lot, especially for the long no-cut footage, the famous car chase. You should search it on YouTube, and also the big reveal at the end where everything stops. Amazing. What this movie does so brilliantly, all of the world building, the exposition, the ideological collapse, all of that is in the background. The focus is on Theo and his story, but probably even more interesting is the background, the scenes, the world building, the new snippets we get, footage of the cages, and so on and so on. Endlessly rewatchable and never dull. It has heart, it is also brutal, with great action, insanely well made and very thrilling. And crucially, for science fiction, it's exploring an idea. What happens with the society that cannot reproduce? The scenes and the technology of this near future are very clever and unobtrusive and are just part of the normal life, and they seem logical. Just a real masterclass, shows why Cuarón is one of the best at the moment. And if you haven't watched his Roma, the Oscar winner, what are you waiting? At number 6, we have A Clockwork Orange, released in 1971, directed by Stanley Kubrick. Starting great Malcolm McDowell as Alex, a delinquent, only 15 years of age, based on a novel also called Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. I've read the novel, both translated and in English, but both were European edition with a longer, more redeeming ending. Kubrick adopted the American cut, which ends on a darker, cynical, nihilistic outlook, very Kubrick-esque, and I think it suits the movie. Alex has a gang and he does some pretty awful crime against the weaker population, beating old people, raping women, gang violence, and so on and so on. A bit of the old ultra violence, as Alex would say, totally normal behavior for a 15-year-old. There are some tensions in his group, and this eventually brings Alex to an arrest. And this is where the movie shifts tonally and becomes something much bigger. One of the main themes is a new rehabilitation technique called the Ludovico technique, which robs the patient of his violent impulses. This opens themes of what is free will, what is moral choice, if we are still human, if we aren't able to decide on our own. Also ties in the political and societal, a great cacophony, super tight, super powerful, super meaningful. The movie is very pompous, even funny, has wonderful flow and music selection. Everything is very dynamic with lots of weird technical approaches, like the groundbreaking use of handheld camera and fisheye lenses. It is endlessly quotable and rewatchable. The youth in the movie and in the book adapted a Russian infused slang, brilliantly written and acted. It is probably my most watched movie ever. It portrays a not so distant dystopian future, a collapsing society, but very colorful, very 70s. I absolutely adore it, how it looks, how it feels. At number 5, we have Alien, released in 1979, directed by Ridley Scott. Back in the day, Ridley was untouchable. He made some really stunning work. But for this project, the writer Dan O'Bannon was even more crucial. He had the vision, the idea, and the people who could create it. And luckily for us, Star Wars in 1977, so 2 years prior, was a huge success, so the 20th Century Fox studio gave the green light for this sci-fi blockbuster horror. The vision was Texas Chainsaw Massacre of science fiction, which it achieved absolutely brilliantly. It has some of the most iconic dark corridors, alien design, chest busters, great strong female lead in Sigourney Weaver. Today's anti-woke crowd would probably scream with pitchforks and torches if this came out today. Also, H.R. Geiger became a household name after the alien design. The movie understands its limitations so well. Don't overshow the creature or it might look fake. Use the dark to hide the budget and enhance the dread, the claustrophobia. And the production overall, the practical effects are just one of the all-time greats. The movie aged extremely well. It has that distinct 70s filter on it, but it works to its benefit. Needless to say, it spun a whole franchise. Unfortunately, no other installation in the series came close to the visionary high of the first one. Some would say, argue that the Aliens from James Cameron is a worthy second, and I would agree, but in my opinion, it doesn't reach the lean perfection the first movie has to offer. But still, it is a great movie, and of course, you should watch it. And Alien, it is not only a big scary monster on a spaceship type of movie. We have the evergreen megacorporations, science fiction with their dubious intentions and great exploration of an AI in a form of androids. And all of the technology, the robots, the ship design, it just works. It is believable, logical, and with a very distinct style and vision. A masterpiece, and if you haven't seen it, I don't know what the hell are you doing. At number 4, we have Blade Runner. Again, Ridley Scott, 3 years later in 1982. Really? You used to make such monumental movies. What happened? Probably age, money. Yeah, Blade Runner, it is the cyberpunk of the era, but not the only cyberpunk on the list. Oh, the visuals. Hard to do them any better. The scenes, the rain, the lights, the mood, the costumes, everything just works in creating this amazing cyberpunk world. It has many director's cuts. I've probably seen 4 or 5 different versions. I even enjoyed the one where we have a noir style narration. But if you're looking to see it, search for the final cut. I think I have to recheck this. So much iconic stuff: the flying cars, the replicas, the mega corporations, the grime, the technology. So good. Harrison Ford, our Blade Runner, is hunting for escaped replicas whose society labeled as obsolete, as dangerous. From this comes the core questions of what it is to be human, what makes you a human being, and so on. It is loosely based on the work of Philip K. Dick, a great science fiction author, on the book Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? It's a good book, but I think the movie is better, and luckily the movie is more loosely based, a more loose adaptation. And it has one of the most iconic performances by Ruth Hauer as the replica Betty. He delivers the best monologue in the whole movie, the monologue that really takes the movie to another level, probably one of the best in cinematic history, and Hauer even changed parts of it without Scott's knowledge. And the changes were so good that they were kept in the movie. At number 3, we have Akira, released in 1988, directed and created by Katsuhiro Otomo. It is a manga adaptation, which also was created by Otomo, which started in 1982, the same year as Blade Runner was released, and you could argue there are some influences. And this is the second quintessential cyberpunk movie of the 80s. It is also a very important anime that laid groundwork for anime to be considered for adult entertainment and had a really good performance in the West. First, the animation is absolutely astonishing. Rarely do we get this level of detail, flow, and creativity. It is worth to watch just for the animation. Second, they respect so much in it. After the war, we get Neo Tokyo, which was built on apocalyptic remnants of the old Tokyo. The setting is cyberpunk to the max. Neo Tokyo is plagued by corruption, mega corporations, anti-government protests, terrorism, and gang violence. And we get to follow a young motorbike gang. Our main protagonist has this iconic red bike you see on all the posters. Starts off as relatively innocent local gang violence, but the boys are eventually sucked into something mega political with terrorists and army conflict that escalates to the max. As a payoff, we get that famous Tatsuo transformation, which is a reference absolutely abused in many other media. I have it on a yearly rewatch schedule, every time as impressive as the last. It's big, it's bold, it has great pacing, great action, and it is still so fucking cool. The bikes, the city, the powers, the technology, the special children, and the whole plot with all of the background happening. In that regard, it is a bit similar as Children of Men. Lots of the details and the world building are in the background, so multiple watches are always rewarded. Absolutely monumental. At number 2, Pisma mrtvog človeka, Dead Man's Letters, released in 1986. So enough cyberpunk, let's go back to post-apocalypse. Dead Man's Letters are directed by Konstantin Lupushansky, who was a student of the great Andrei Tarkovsky. 2 of his films from Tarkovsky almost made it to my top 10. We're talking about Stalker and The Solaris. And in Dead Man's Letters, you can see the influence of Tarkovsky as well, very artsy stuff. It was produced under Soviet Union. I really like the science fiction of the Soviet Union era. As you can imagine, during the totalitarian regime, there was a hard censor on anti-establishment propaganda. You couldn't really create counterculture media. Well, smart people found out that you can express more freely in the domain of science fiction. And boy did they express. I will probably do a selection of the best Soviet sci-fi books, movies of all time in the future. A fascinating field that is sadly neglected by most of the Western consumers. One of these expressions is the crowning achievement by Constantine, this Dead Man's Letters. He also created a somehow similar but more ambitious movie called A Visitor to the Museum 2 years later. I would recommend it as well, but it is way more art housey, a bit more disjointed and less sciencey. Dead Man's Letters was co-written by the director and Rybakov and one of the Strugatsky brothers, both very seasoned and amazing writers of the Soviet science fiction. Think of Roadside Picnic and Hard to Be a God. The production was heavily monitored by KGB, but luckily for us, in the late 80s, its grip had loosened and a lot of things got through. As you can imagine, it has that contemplative existential dread in its core, lots of talking, and what better setting than an underground bunker after the nuclear apocalypse to explore these themes. We follow Professor Larsen and his struggle to find footing in this newly shaped remnant of society. It is bleak, it is poetic, it is depressing, and it is so beautiful. What really strikes me every time I watch it is the amazing production design and cinematography. Totally unique, totally memorable. It is the best post-apocalyptic movie that is dealing with the immediate aftermath, and I think it is absolutely essential. And at number one, the only, the unrepeatable, although many have tried, the 2001 A Space Odyssey from Stanley Kubrick, who also co-wrote the script with the great Arthur C. Clarke. It is the perfect movie. Something I can't really think is possible to repeat with today's limitations regarding what is watchable, what is considered watchable, the dopamine loop we need and studios understand we need. It is hard to say anything new about this movie. It has the grand ideas, the evolution of thought, beings, of everything, progress, its pitfalls, technology, first contact, but also holds a great mystery and is trippy as hell. Actually, the hippies from the late 60s really rescued it from obscurity. At the start, it wasn't doing very well. It was actually hated by most of the critics. I haven't read the book from Clarke yet. I did watch the 2010 some continuum of the story, but I really don't regard them when I'm considering 2001. It is on its own self-standing monument, a monolith, one could say. It is one of the most iconic, most referenced movies. For me, the best looking movie ever produced. It is worth to watch it just so we get all the references that are constantly reused in other pop culture. Even the Barbie movie had the Space Odyssey reference the very beginning of the movie. It's great. It also has a lot of critics, especially for its tempo. I understand this criticism, but I also think that the tempo is essential for the epicness, the contemplative moments, the beautiful scenery to really set you in this special state of mind of slight disconnect and awe. People also say that it is meaningless, but I have to disagree. The ideas are just not handed on a silver plate, they're mostly visually communicated, and there are a lot of ideas and themes in this movie. Interestingly, for Space Odyssey, this was the only Oscar Stanley Kubrick received, and not even for direction, but for special effects. It is one of my all-time favorite movies, bold, beautiful, strange, prophetic, packed with ideas. Imagine being an edgy hippie teenager, first time reading Thus Speak Zarathustra from Nietzsche, and suddenly connecting the theme Thus Speak Zarathustra from Richard Strauss, that is the main theme of the movie, and the three metamorphoses story, The Camel, Lion, and Child from Nietzsche, into this monumental science fiction monolith. I felt very proud when I made these connections. It is almost like a religious experience, which is kinda ironic when discussing science fiction. It is the crowning jewel of all the science fiction, unrepeatable, something to be cherished and protected. studied and marveled. So that is why it is my number one. And this is it for the list. If you have your own top 10 science fiction movies list, I would love to read it in the comments. And also any other thoughts and ideas on this topic, very welcomed in the topics. And that's it. Ciao.